Okay, so our sourdough is still expanding before we bake the bread. I've done some dishes, done a little cleanup around the kitchen, and getting ready to go out and mow the lawn. But I thought before I do that, I would show you what I do to mill my own flour. So what I have here, this is a stone flour mill, grain mill. It's the Fidibus model from Como. It's a German brand. It's great, made out of beech wood. It's got a hopper here. This is where you put the grain, chute, comes out the flour. You can turn this to set your fineness. There's a scale right here that shows from fine to coarse, and there's a little dot here that lines up with that. I've got it almost over to the finest, not quite to the finest, but this is loud, so I'm going to try to do the explanation first, and then we'll turn it on and let it run, and you'll see how I do flour. Now I've got some ingredients set aside here. What I'm going to be using is hard white wheat, and I'll open this up for you. It's wheat kernels. Okay. You can buy this stuff. It's easiest to buy it online. You can get it in a 10-pound can like this, or a 50-pound bag, or a 5-gallon bucket. You can have hard white wheat. You can get hard red winter wheat. Both will work. Both of those hard wheats are high in gluten. They're great for bread. The red wheat is a little bit darker, and you'll get a darker loaf out of it. It's got a little bit of a stronger flavor too, which is fine. I like it. I just happen to have this right now. I've got a bunch of red wheat in the basement. And it keeps, that wheat, as long as you keep it sealed up, that'll keep years and years and years and years. So there's no worries there. And what we're gonna have when we're done here is flour as fresh as you can have it. Newly milled, stone ground flour, and I'll show you when we're done, it comes out just fine like a commercial flour. It's not flaky and rough like the commercial whole wheat flours. Now, you can use a commercial whole wheat flour and your bread will turn out fine and it'll be good for you. I just happen to prefer the texture of a finer grain, and I enjoy the freshness of it. So that's what we're going to do. I've got some other ingredients here, and these are flavorings, and I will run these through the mill. You don't have to, but I will. Here we have caraway seed. That's normal in a rye bread, especially a sourdough. Now I will say most commercial sourdoughs, way too much caraway. And that's mainly because they use a rye flour that's a light rye. It doesn't have a whole lot of flavor of its own. Most of them are not whole grain ryes. So they try to give it the flavor of rye bread by using a lot of caraway seed. That's what people associate with rye bread. I like just a little bit of rye, just for a little background flavor. If you use too much caraway, in my opinion, then the bread is not as adaptable. There's certain things it'll go good with, say corned beef or something flavored like that. But if you want to use a mild cheese with it, or just a piece of buttered toast, it's just overwhelming caraway. And I don't like to bite down on caraway, and my wife actually doesn't like caraway. I do like it, but sometimes you bite down on a caraway seed and it's just a big burst of caraway. By milling this through the mill, we're not going to have any big pieces of that. It's going to be a uniform background note all throughout the bread. And in addition to that, we have chornushka, which is also known as black caraway. It's really not in the caraway family. It's nigella seed. This is typical in a New York Jewish rye, and it has a different flavor profile from caraway. It's similar, but it's quite noticeably different. If if you compare them side to side. And so I'll put some of this in there too, just for another flavor profile. And here I have granulated onion. I'm going to put some of that in there too. I like that flavor. It gives it an aroma that's very good. Can you make sourdough rye bread without these three things? You absolutely can, and it'll be fine bread. I like just a little bit of onion in the background. If you don't have onion powder, you can chop up an onion fine. You can grate an onion. You can use dehydrated onions. Those work fine. You can even saute your onions in a little bit of butter and use them that way. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. Convenience sake, granulated onion goes in pretty easy. And then I've got one other thing here, and that is, this is malted barley. And I bought this at my local brewer supply. It's used for beer making. And this is a little bit of a secret ingredient. If you notice, when you buy commercial flour, if you read the ingredients on commercial flour, it is not just wheat. It's often bromated, bleached, and all these kinds of things, but it also has barley in it. And there's a reason for that. Specifically malted barley. When barley, which is a grain, when that starts to sprout, which is all that they mean when they say malted, it's packed with enzymes that are very beneficial to yeast in their life cycle. Those enzymes help the yeast break down the starches, which you'll find in sugar, or starches that you'll find in flour. It helps them to break that down into sugar easily, and that's what yeast will consume, is sugar. So by putting a little bit of barley malt in with your flour, you give your yeast a boost, and that makes for a good rise. And there's also nutritional value to it too, but you're putting in such a small amount that I really don't even consider that to be a thing. That's not the reason we do it. So what I'm going to do here is, first I'm going to run a little bit of the wheat with our flavoring spices through the mill, and then I'll put more of just the wheat in to just kind of flush out all that stuff from the mill so it's not in there the next time I use it. So what we'll do is we'll just put a little bit of this right here in this small bowl. That's the wheat. I've got a teaspoon of malted barley. And I think I'll go 2. Doesn't matter. You can use whatever you want. A little bit goes a long way. More isn't going to hurt you. So there, we did 3. Feeling a little generous today. Now we're going to go with the chornyushka. There you go. Generous teaspoon of that. Right in there. Caraway. Again, teaspoon of that. Oh, you can really smell that caraway. Yeah, let's go a teaspoon and a half this time. Feeling generous, like I said. It's the beauty of homemade bread. You do whatever you want to do. You can make every loaf different if you want to. I'll seal these up here. I'm just going to kind of stir this up. And you might ask, why don't I just send the spices through the mill all by themselves? Well, could do that. I just think that the wheat kind of helps transport it through the grinding stones. So that's what I do. You certainly wouldn't have to do that. The onion's already granulated, so I don't have to put that through there. I'm just going to take a teaspoon of the granulated onion. Let's just toss it in there. It's waiting for the flour to come join it. So I'm gonna turn this thing on now, and it'll be loud, so I won't be able to talk to you. It'll be relatively quickly though. We'll put the wheat in, we'll put the lid on, I'll let you watch it run through, and join you back in a minute here. So as you can see, pretty quick. You can see it's kind of a dark flour. That's because of the nigella and the caraway that are in it. The barley is in there with it right now. But that went through pretty quick. Hopper's empty. But for a little bit of the charnushka there that's powder, that'll come through when I put the rest of the wheat in there. And so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to mill up some wheat. Yeah, I'm going to guess at the amount that I'm going to need for today's baking. If I have a little bit of leftover, I'll save it for next time. And you'll see when this comes out of the spout, this is going to be a much lighter color than what's in there right now. So, that went by relatively quickly. Now you can see, I want you to look here, see what we've got for flour here. It's very fine, almost like pastry flour. A little bit rougher than that. It's a slightly gritty, but some of that grittiness will certainly go away as that bran that's in this wheat soaks up some of the moisture and softens. But it's just a very nice flour. This is really one of the main reasons I like to mill my own flour. You can't get a quality of flour like this in the store. Now again, if you buy store-bought flour, that will work fine for you. I tend to go, if I buy store flour, I'll buy the unbleached, unbromated, just because I prefer fewer chemicals and additives in my flour. And I tend to prefer the stone ground, although it wouldn't necessarily have to be. But they make flour completely different for commercial uses. They don't stone grind it generally unless it's labeled as stone ground. They'll put it through a roller and crush it. Then they'll sift out all the shards of the bran, and you'll end up with white flour. Then they'll add some of that bran back to it, and that's what they market as whole wheat flour. And that's fine. It just has a different texture. So we'll leave this. I'll mix this up a little bit. kind of see the different colors there. Oh, we'll make this a nice mixed flour, and it smells right now. This flour smells like caraway and nigella and onion. Again, you could make a straight bread without any of those flavoring, and these are subtle. These will be subtle in the final bread. I don't like to be hit over the head with herbal flavors in my bread. It's just a little background note. And in my opinion, that's the way it should be. And that's not the way you buy rye breads in the store. They're over the top. Most people would not recognize the flavor of rye bread without the caraway. But in mine, the flavor of the rye and the wheat comes through. So we'll leave this now until our sourdough is ready this evening, and then we'll incorporate it into the bread.